us? I don't think so. Shall we? Hello, is the sound? Oh, hi. Right, Christ is really blinding here. Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. So I think we're just going to run through what we all do and kind of give a bit of background first. So I can't actually see anyone. My name is Timmy Atabori. I'm an engine programmer in the games industry. I'm also the chair of an organization called the International Game Developers Association, or IGDA Scotland. We do a bunch of events around Scotland focusing on game developers specifically, but open to everyone, where we do talks, different events with a bit of socializing, networking attached, and we also support various different events around Scotland focusing on games and game development. So a bit about sort of my journey, I guess, and how I got into the industry. I come from Hungary originally. I always knew I wanted to be in games, so when I was 16 I moved to Ireland to finish school there because I knew that in Hungary there was not really any opportunities for game development. When I finished school there, I came over to Dundee and studied computer games technology at Abertay. And when I graduated from there, I landed my job as an engine programmer, which is super cool. So what I do there is basically work on the core technology of our games, and everything from optimizing the code that it runs as best as possible on all the platforms, to some of the sort of underlying infrastructure of the game, even supporting other developers, that kind of thing. So what kind of inspired me to get into games, and I don't know if there's anyone here who's also interested in pursuing a career as a developer in games, was that I think it's such a fantastic medium for combining all the different skill sets of all the different people that it brings together to create something different and introduce it to new experiences and understand new perspectives. I think it's a fantastic learning tool. I think it's just super exciting every day because you're working on these immensely complex but really inspiring problems. Especially as a programmer, I find myself just solving completely different problems every day, and I think that's really interesting, and I'm sure we'll hear about some of the other perspectives from the other panelists as well. A bit more about, I guess, the IGDA, what we do. So we support developers. If you're considering going into the industry or studying or looking for your first job, then we're more than welcome to come along to our events. We try and make sure that you know what you're doing, put you in touch with anyone that can help you out, sort of thing. I have no idea how much more I have, but I mean that's it in a nutshell, but I'm sure we'll get to questions, right? So I don't want to ramble on too much about stuff that you don't care about. I'd rather get to the part where you can ask specific questions. So I'll pass you on to the next person.
Sure, so my name's Russell. I'm the CEO of Candle Corp. You can see our booth, if you head that way, is full of green and slime. You can probably see it everywhere. My journey was a little bit different to yourself, but what it was is I actually was self-taught from the age of 6. I know, don't freak out, we didn't have colour screen monitors, okay? Basically, I remember we had Mad Max on my BBC IB at the time, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever that I could change the text in the start menu. Thought I was like a total elite hacker, and from that point onwards just loved it. I then worked for a huge AAA company for a couple of years, who eventually went bust, sadly. But from that point onwards I started my own company, and what we did is we basically started off as myself. I made a bunch of Flash games when Flash games were cool, and what we eventually moved on to is, obviously as engines progressed, we moved more onto stuff, Visual Basic, Unity, moved through a bunch of different languages, and we've ended up, Unity is mainly what we focus on now. We have a staff of 5 at the moment. People constantly ask about jobs. We can offer internships sometimes, but sadly we can't offer any more jobs at the moment. But if anybody wants to pop by, talk about game development, feel free to, or at the end obviously we've got a questionnaire, Q&A.
Hi everyone, can you all hear me? Yeah. My name is Alan Caleb. I'm a senior artist at Digimania in Glasgow. I'm also an indie developer in my spare time, and I'm the creator of Dear the Monkey for iPhone and iPad. Now, I I think we've been asked to talk about our path through the industry, and mine starts way back in probably 1984. Yes, I am that old. During my summer holidays, myself and my twin brother used to make games on our Commodore 64. I would spend the entire summer drawing all these amazing pieces of artwork, and then we'd stand looking at these drawings and we'd say, so how do we get these in the computer? And we didn't have a clue. So we'd just make a text adventure game and we'd be really happy with that, and it was great. But as years went by, eventually we learned ways to improve our skills and start making graphics that could actually be really in the games. And eventually I left school, got a first job in the industry, and it was epic. You're up all night, you're working crazy hours, you're drinking Red Bull, you're eating pizzas, there's pinball machines. It was just, we were living the dream. It was just absolutely insane. But I remember when I went for the interview there, the guy said, I'm going to hire you, but it's simply because you were really honest on the application form. We asked you to rate your skills. Are you any good at Photoshop? Are you any good at 3D? And I was like giving myself scores of like 4, 5 out of 10, and the guy said, everyone else gave themselves 9s and 10s. You've been really, really honest. You understand where you actually are in the great scheme of things. And he said, and that's why I'm going to hire you, because you understand that you have a huge journey ahead of yourself. You've got so much to learn. And I think a really good piece of advice is if you're trying to get into the industry, is to understand how much you need to learn and be willing to learn. And luckily now, you've got YouTube. You've got no excuse for not learning new skills all the time. You've got so much free knowledge. And I still use YouTube to learn stuff. I'm always having to keep my skills fresh because there's all these people coming straight out of university and they know pieces of software that I've never even heard of. And my boss is like, how come you don't know how to use that software or this software? And I'm like, I'm working round the clock for you. I've got no time to learn new things. So you have to be willing to keep your skills fresh at all time. You need to be willing to learn new skills. You need to be willing to work really hard. And it is a hard industry, and it's great when you're young because you can put in the hours, you can do loads of hours. But when you get to my age, it's not so good for you. You've got other people doing all the hours, staying up late, drinking Red Bull. And you turn around one day and you think, I know, I'm going to make an indie game. And for the first time in years, you've got a goal again. You're moving forward. No one's telling you what to do. You're in charge of everything. And it's totally awesome. Then you're staying up late, drinking Red Bull, eating pizzas, you're getting fat. But you're having a great time. So you've got to be willing to work hard, and you've got to love what you do. If you love making games, start off at any age, scribble down your ideas on notepads. All great ideas start in notepads just as scribbles. Even if you can't take them any further than that, if you're a young kid at primary school or high school, start there. Buy Mario Maker, build your own levels, learn what makes games great, study other people's games. And I think if you're willing to do that and really passionate about what you do, you'll get into the industry and you will enjoy it. And it's epic. It's hard, but it's totally epic. And if anybody wants to come over and play Dare the Monkey later and have a chat, I'm quite happy to help you guys out. So that's really my journey.
Can you put your hands together for some of our panel? Thanks very much, guys. So we're just going to jump onto a Q&A. I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask. So, Timea, where do you see the industry going? What does the next 6 months to a year look like? Can you give us some hints and tips?
So where the industry is going, excuse me. It's a very interesting question because obviously, we're not clairvoyants, we can't predict the future, but I think we are living in an incredibly exciting time in the games industry. Like, new technologies are coming around with completely, unprecedented pace, and just the sheer opportunity that's there for people coming into the industry. We have so many tools that have popped up in the last 5 years that are freely available to anyone. There's amazing communities around it, so you can learn how to use them. You can start making your own games without any formal education, without even a team, without any sort of barrier to entry, really. And that's completely opening up the. Are we feedbacking? Sorry. That's completely opening up the new avenues for people creating and sharing completely new stories. I mean, we have obviously a new generation of consoles came out, a couple years ago now. VR's kind of, on the edge, kind of creeping in. We'll see where it goes. It's really exciting to see the possibilities in that. The indie scene is growing and blossoming like never before. It's absolutely fantastic to see. So I can't tell where the industry is headed, but I think it's going to very positive places. I think we're just going to get more and more people involved, a really diverse group of people creating really cool stuff. And I think we're moving away from this very singular concept of what games are and what gamers can be, and towards something that's more inclusive, where we can include everyone and share stories that are interesting and new and fresh with a wider audience. And I think that's super exciting. And hopefully some of you will be a part of that.
Thanks, Tamia. Okay, we'll put it out to the audience. Does anybody get any questions for the developers?
Hi. I totally agree with what you said there. I'm a draftsman, and I'm really interested in the architectural side of things for the games engines, for visualizing buildings and the like. And I see a great future for the games industry. My question is, maybe to all of you, you spoke about turning down jobs and the like. It's more how many people are out there looking for games jobs in the games industry just now, and how much future that has for people starting now in the industry, looking for a job maybe in 5 years' time.
So basically the question about job prospects 5 years down the line for people wanting to enter now. I can say something, but if you guys want to take it, I'm happy.
Sure. So for me, hello. Yeah. So for me, so it's about job prosperity in 5 years. Yeah. I think we're getting a bit of feedback. What it is for me at the moment, I've just taken on a 5th employee. For me, we're looking for someone very focused in what they were employed to do. Up until now, we've had people, our artist is a master artist, so she looks after several different fields, from concept to actual in-game to specifications. She does all that, whereas what we were looking for with a programmer was a specific task, and that's all they're employed to do. And I think in the future, you're still going to need people that are good at, for example, server architecture, stuff like that. Cloud-based architecture is becoming a huge market right now, and I can only see it growing, and they're going to need people that are specifically good at stuff. For the smaller companies, it does help to have someone that's good all round, but when it comes down to crunch time and your servers are dying on you and everything's on fire, you need the guy or woman that is good at that position, and it just comes down to what is needing filled at the time, I think. So I definitely see in the future people still needing specifics for sure.
Also, I would say that in terms of jobs in general in the industry, if you're looking to get into the games industry, you really should be happy to go anywhere and work. You should be happy to travel to other countries, because studios they come and go quite often. You can get to the end of a project, the studio's got no other work, so studios close down a lot and people have to move, and you maybe have to move not just all over the UK but possibly all over the world, and that's worth considering. If that's not the kind of thing that you think you'd be comfortable with, then the games industry might be very difficult for you, especially when you want to settle down and live in the one place. So you may have to really consider that you may have to travel the world to keep your job prospects fresh. And I think it's also a terrible opportunity.
And to kind of add to that as well, when it comes to jobs, I think another really exciting thing about the industry already, and looking into the future as well, is that it's really easy to create your own opportunities. So you don't have to wait on a company to hire you. You can just start, even if you just have a smartphone, you can start developing for it, start releasing for it. Really, there is nothing stopping you from putting something out there. Whether, obviously you might make it, really well and you get lucky and you actually can support yourself from the income that you generate from your own projects. Alternatively, it's a fantastic portfolio piece for applying for a studio. So I can only encourage people to, start looking into things like Unity and Unreal, all these freely available game engines that you can start developing actual, real quality software in, or even something like Twine, which is, sort of more beginner level, or Scratch, which is especially for kids really useful. And start making things, because the great thing about the games industry and the sort of process of developing games is it's iterative. So you start out with something small and then you fail inevitably, and then you keep improving it until it's something good. So I think it's important to start learning that process and getting the hang of that very early, rather than getting your first job somehow without knowing that and then being really surprised of like, oh wow, okay, this is how things work. So get your hands dirty early. And I personally see a really bright future for the industry. I don't think, we're always in need of people who are passionate and who are talented and who have the skills. And equally, it's not just about big companies anymore. It's about smaller companies who are also hiring, but it's also about independent developers and groups who are making stuff at home. So it's such an exciting industry because there are no there are no sort of supply issues when it comes to jobs, because you can create your own supply.
Okay, thanks for that. Is there any more questions?
If you could each go back to visit your younger selves, what advice would you give yourself?
What advice would we give to ourselves? Was that the question? I mean, that's such a broad question. Definitely, I think I think it's really important to rely on community and make connections, not just purely in a sense of like, I'm going to get to know you because you can give me a job, but because it's such a tight-knit community, especially in Scotland, everyone knows everyone, and it can be a really helpful thing if you start building a community around yourself and start giving back to that community as well. So remembering that game development is not at all an independent and sort of individual effort, that it's very much a team effort. Even if you're working on your own, you'll be relying on, support and sort of tutorials, community, all that sort of things around the tool that you're using. So realizing that soon is very important on one hand, but also just to not be afraid to do stuff and show it off, because I think with every creative job, people can feel really sort of precious about the things that they're doing, and it can be really difficult to put it out there and show it to people and get some feedback, but it's so important. So, just shed your insecurities and forget about like, oh, what if it's not perfect, and what if someone doesn't like it, and just go for it, because feedback is like the single most valuable thing you can get.
So if I was to go back, I've got two answers, just to make it complicated, because why not? But the first answer would be sleep just now before you start, because honestly, once you start in this industry, your sleep goes nowhere. You are up 16, 18 hours a day working constantly to start yourself off, especially, I don't know what it's like going straight into a bigger company, but for if you're indie, you won't have a sleep pattern. You'll just get up, work until you can't work anymore, go to sleep, get up, work until you can't do it anymore. So if I was speaking to my younger self before, I would say sleep as much as you can right now, because you're going to need it. Whereas the second, what I would say is learn marketing, especially if you're going to go indie. The number one thing I absolutely abysmally failed at was marketing when I started. Did not realise how heavily our industry actually requires marketing. So even though you could have the best game in the world, if nobody knows about it, nobody's going to buy it. Basically, it comes down to that old sort of scenario.
I would say if I could go back when I started, I'd say to myself, do not be afraid to fail. Failure is a good thing. If you fail, and learn from your mistakes, you'll succeed eventually. Now, I've never worked in any of the big AAA studios. I've always worked for small to medium-sized studios, and part of it is because I was always afraid to apply for the jobs. What if they don't think I'm any good? I couldn't stand the rejection. I'd never recover from that. But you have to be willing to put yourself through that. If you want those jobs, you have to go for them. You have to be willing to maybe be rejected, figure out why you didn't get into it, and then improve. So never be afraid to fail. I've always wanted to do my own games in my spare time. But, oh, what if nobody didn't like them? What if they don't work? You have to set that aside. Be brave. Go for it. Learn from your mistakes. Go for it again. Do it over and over again, and eventually you will succeed. I'm absolutely certain of it.
Hi. How do you guys find the game development industry here in Scotland compared to like the United States, London, and Europe? Like, is it obviously, you know, it's much smaller, but does that make it more difficult? You know, because you're not surrounded by so many peers.
What was the end of that question? What was the end of the question? Is it more difficult to get into the industry in Scotland? Was that the end of it? Just the differences between Scotland and right. Well, coming from IGDA Scotland, we do interact with a lot of the companies and a lot of the developer bases, and I actually find the Scottish games industry to be incredibly thriving. Obviously, it is smaller than in England or in the US, but look at the size of the country; it's obviously going to be smaller. That being said, obviously we have one of the biggest AAA companies here, and beyond that, there are, I'm pretty sure, more than 100 smaller mobile and independent companies. So there is a lot there. Obviously, I guess it depends on your focus. If you're really interested in AAA, then you kind of have one choice in Scotland, or you go somewhere else. But if that's not your single goal, then I think there's plenty of opportunity. I actually think because it's a smaller industry, as I've already mentioned before, it's so much more tighter knit. So people support each other, and that's actually really nice that you can kind of get, bounce ideas off each other, get some support from, your fellow devs that you either went to uni with or maybe work together with in one of the big companies, or just know from like networking events. I think that's a really nice dynamic that is probably relatively unique for smaller places. But yeah, it's obviously going to be smaller than like the US, but in particular with the US, I prefer like the European culture of working and games in general. The US is very crunch heavy sometimes, which, as we mentioned before, that's definitely something that as an industry we should combat and we should, work against. But yeah, that's me.
To add to that, I mean, I have friends that work they are American, they work in the States, and they would, the culture over here, they would love to come back to this country and work. I think it's a great credit to what the country has to offer that they would want to do that. I'm talking about people working at studios such as Pixar and DreamWorks who would still love to come back here and work in Scotland. So I think we should be very proud of what we've got in Scotland.
I think one of the big differences between, especially the US market and ourselves, is the workflow structure seems to differ massively. Over here, I would say our workflow structure tends to be, especially because we have smaller companies, smaller to medium companies, the staff at the bottom still know the people at the top. If you go and work for EA or Ubisoft, I can't imagine you're sitting a couple of desks away from Yves Gilmore. I'm pretty sure he's got his own office covered in 100 feet of glass, and he's got his own stuff to do, so you don't really get that sort of interaction. Especially for ourselves, our QA is very important to us especially, and if I couldn't directly talk to my QA, quite a few of our releases would not have made it in time. So I think we are much more tight-knit overall, and I think it plays to our strengths, whereas obviously US have different strengths, and they have bigger companies, bigger marketing budgets, etc. So.
Okay, we've got time for another 2 questions. Has anybody else got a question in the audience? Maybe just answer one. One of you guys answer it.
Right. I suppose this might be a follow-up to a previous question that was asked, but when it comes to getting into the industry, a lot of people might be wondering how the process of even such things as learning the basics might go, because as Russell has mentioned, he has self-taught himself, but a lot of people obviously cannot do that. People's work ethics differ. Even things like people's moods can differ. And some people just might not be capable of doing that kind of thing. So I was wondering if the best opportunity isn't presented to you, what would be the best, what tips would you have for learning the fundamentals?
Who wants to take it? I don't mind.
So for me, so the question is, any tips for getting into the industry, basically, from a starting point of view? So what it is for me, believe it or not, I don't look at people's CVs. Probably not a good thing, but I just don't look at people's CVs. They send it in. I look at the name and I put it on a file. And what happens is all I care about is the portfolio that you've created. Your portfolio is 150% to me what you've done, can do, and I can see the progression from what you started at to where you are now. So I can see that there's a learning curve, and I know what to expect if you're to stay in my company for 5, 10 years, etc. So don't, it sounds bad, but don't worry too much about getting on paper what you can do. Worry about showing me. You know, if you say, oh, you know, I'm really good at graphics programming, you know, etc. Show me a graphically amazing, it doesn't even have to be a game, screenshot or visual effects, anything. Just show me that that's what you're good at. You know, like, don't, a lot of people put, the number one common thing I see is I'm a programmer. And that tells me nothing, basically. I don't know what language, you could be a web programmer, which is of no use for any of my games at the moment. So, you know, you have to be really specific. You know, if you're good at modeling environments, put, I'm really good at modeling environments. Don't say, you know, I'm just a good modeler and here's some of the things I've done, and show me an okay rigged model next to a really nice environment. You know, show off the strengths that you're good at. And for learning, choose a specific. Honestly, be good at everything, but choose a specific, because what happens is when you choose a specific, say it's environmental modeling, you will get really good at it, and that will go up. But what you don't realise is in the background you've subconsciously learned all the stuff that makes you slightly better at rigging, etc. on the way up as well. So imagine it like a big peak. Your best thing at the top, and everything else acts like that. So the higher it gets, everything else slowly climbs with it as well. Not at the same pace, but if that's what you're applying for, show that that's what you're good at.
I'd just like to add to that when I look through CVs when people are applying for jobs at Digimania, just like Russell, I'm not interested in what university you've been to, what college you've been to, what your qualifications are at school. So if you want to get into the games industry and school's not being your thing, that is not the end of it. You can still get in. If you're at home, I used to spend all my spare time at home working on computer graphics, and it was actually stuff I did in my spare time. It was not my university degree that got me into the industry. It was just my personal work. So if you're working on your own personal work, be that code that you're doing or artwork that you're doing, that will get you in. And at that level, the standard doesn't need to be insane. You just need to show promise. Don't, at that level, aim as high as you can. Look at the big games that are out and try to replicate what they're doing. But if you can't reach that level, don't worry, because you're starting out. So your qualifications aren't necessarily the most important thing, but what you do with your own portfolio and your own spare time, that is absolutely the stuff that will get you a job in the industry.
One more quick question, if anybody's got one question left. Are we all done? Any more questions? Did you put your hand up there? No? No. Okay, we're done. Can you put your hands together then for the guys? Thanks very much. Okay, thank you.